All right, the mere fact that this question involves a colon and a comma tells me I'm going to need to think about sentence structure. So as I'm reading this, my brain is just thinking about sentences. Where do they start? Where do they end? What is extra? So let's take a look at this passage with that in mind. Researchers studying magnetosensation have determined why some soil-dwelling roundworms in the southern hemisphere move in the opposite direction of Earth's magnetic field when searching for food. Right, I'm pausing there because it's giving me that option with choice A, right? They're telling me you could kind of end the sentence there. Remember, the rule for a colon is that we need to have a complete sentence beforehand, but afterwards we have some flexibility. So right now I'm kind of testing, does this follow that rule? And yeah, that was a full thought. I could just end it at the word food and put a period if I wanted to, but they're going to continue. So I don't know whether that continuation, I don't know what kind of thing it is yet. Is it extra? Is it a sentence? Let's see. Let's ignore choice C, but let's kind of just continue with the word in. In the northern hemisphere, the magnetic field points down into the ground, but in the southern hemisphere, it points up toward the surface and away from the worm's food sources. Hopefully that also sounds like a complete thought to you. That is a complete sentence. If we kind of cut it down, it would say something like this. The magnetic field points down, but or I guess I can include this part, it's extra, but in the northern hemisphere, the magnetic field points down, but in the southern hemisphere, it points up. So basically, we have a complete thought that could just end with a period there as well. And that is not good, because that means that we have a run-on sentence unless we use some strong punctuation mark to separate these, right? So a period would be the strongest, most obvious way to separate two sentences. That option is not available to us. But instead, the colon could work. Maybe choice C, we've got to test that out. But certainly we need something stronger than a comma. There is not enough here. If we had a comma and a word like and, or something that's a conjunction, we might be able to do it. It still feels kind of long, but we might be able to do it. But the comma by itself, without a helper word, is not going to cut it. And certainly in D, we need some pause there. We clearly could end the thought or the clause, so we need something to show that. So let's try C. It's so hard to, this is such a long sentence. Researchers studying magnetosensation have determined why some soil-dwelling roundworms in the southern hemisphere move in the opposite direction of Earth's magnetic field when searching for food, while in the northern hemisphere, the magnetic field points down into the ground, but in the southern hemisphere, oh, you can hear it right there. The while is not contrasting with the first sentence. There's a contrast here, but it's all within the northern southern hemisphere part of this passage, right? So this is just not correct. There's too many contrasts. We're confusing the ideas. So A is definitely the right answer. And I know why many of you would not pick that. It's because you don't use colons very often in your own life, and it's a strange kind of thing. It's like picking a hard vocabulary word that you don't know the definition of. It just feels wrong, but sometimes we pick it because everything else is wrong. Let me talk more about the colon, though. This is a great example of how it's really supposed to be used. We learn that a colon is for lists. That's only partially true. Its real purpose is that we have a sentence to start. We could have a complete sentence after, which is what's happening here, but we don't need to. We could also have a list. We could even also have one word. We've got a lot of flexibility. But the stylistic reason we might use a colon is that the second part answers or explains kind of like a question that's raised by the first part. So I'm going to try to reread this with the question part in mind here. Researchers studying magnetosensation have determined why some soil-dwelling roundworms in the southern hemisphere move in the opposite direction of Earth's magnetic field when searching for food. Why do the soil-dwelling roundworms in the southern hemisphere move in the opposite direction? Because in the northern hemisphere, the magnetic field points down into the ground, but in the southern hemisphere, it points up toward the surface and away from worms' food sources. So it's not a literal question, but it's very easy for us to turn it into one, right? The word why is kind of in the first part, and it's very easy to turn it into a question, and then we can clearly see that the second part after the colon is an answer to that question. That's what a colon does, and that's what makes it good for this. So structurally, it's the only one that works, but also stylistically, it fits very nicely with what we're trying to say.